So there are 63 million Americans today, which, by the way, that's a 45% increase from 10 years ago. That's significant. Data is tracked every 5 years to see how many Americans are in a caregiver role. When we say caregiving, we're talking about the unpaid family member who's taking care of an adult child, 18 and older, that perhaps cannot live on their own independently, or they're taking care of a spouse, or they're taking care of a sibling, or in most cases, they're taking care of an elderly parent, somebody who no longer can live safely, on their own. And that's what unpaid caregivers have to do. On the average, I think it's like 24 hours a week, an unpaid family member does their job, does a caregiver job. Now imagine that and having a full-time job, or like you said, running a company, or even a part-time job, or an hourly worker. That's where things get really, really messy.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Reanimated Stories. This is your host, Roger, and today I am joined by Zack, and we have a really cool subject that we are going to talk about. Zack and I had the opportunity to meet in person in Fort Worth and at a summit, and so that was really a great opportunity. Not only that, but Zack and I were able to, well, it wasn't really a contest necessarily, other than we were selected out of, I think, it was like 5 or 6 of us, right? And so we got the opportunity to speak on stage. We had just a few moments and we got voted on at the end. Neither of us won, but Zack, I think, got like second. I got like third and all that. And just absolutely fantastic. We started a conversation afterwards and finally connected from some time because Zack, I'm here in the Central Texas area. Zack, you're up in New York. New Jersey. That's right. Yeah. New Jersey. And so we had it took us a little while, obviously, to connect, but it's been a great connection. And so I absolutely am thrilled and honored to have Zack on here. So Zack, thanks so much for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here, Roger. Thank you. And you were number one in my book, by the way. You should have won that. You were number one. Well, no offense to Michael, who did win.
No, he did fantastic. Yeah. Yeah, no, he did a great job. And yeah, no, I loved what you did. You pulled out those gloves and everything. And that was absolutely fantastic. I love that. That was really cool. So thank you. I appreciate that. Well, Zack, people are probably like, well, what in the world is he talking about with the blue gloves? We can maybe talk about that later. Zack, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So I'm a caregiver and I'm also a caregiver advocate. So what is that? Well, first of all, the caregiver is easy. I've been one now since 2011. So that's quite a long time. I can't believe it's been that long when my father had a stroke. And so I've been a long distance caregiver. And now I also do it for my mother. I'm doing a much better job the second go around than I was doing the first go around. And from those experiences, I was also in HR for many years. And I also ran a home care business for 13 years. And so I just took all those experiences. And now I'm a caregiver advocate. I have a partner, Selma, and the two of us want to work with employers to help them create a culture, a workplace where somebody doesn't have to choose between a job and having to care for somebody. So that's advocacy, caregiver advocacy.
Yeah, that's absolutely such a crucial thing to have. Something that really kind of caught me, it was like when you had mentioned like, well, with my father and then now with my mother. And sometimes, especially if people, it doesn't matter if they're a business owner, if they work in a company, if they're a manager, whatever. You had mentioned, well, sometimes they have to choose between the two and they have to kind of think about it. I remember when we were talking at first and you had said, and I said, who do you want to connect with? Who how can I best, connect you and serve you and all that? And you're like, well, I want to talk to professional caregivers, but not caregivers who are, like that's what they do, but they're professionals who just also happen to be caregivers. Can you speak a little bit more to that and just kind of what that world looks like and how you kind of come in there and talk with them?
Yeah, thank you for that. A very important distinction. So there are 63 million Americans today, which, by the way, that's a 45% increase from 10 years ago. That's significant. Data is tracked every 5 years to see how many Americans are out there and what issues and challenges they're going through that are in a caregiver role. When we say caregiving, we're talking about the unpaid family member who's taking care of an adult child, 18 and older, that perhaps cannot live on their own independently, or they're taking care of a spouse, or they're taking care of a sibling, or in most cases, they're taking care of an elderly parent, somebody who no longer can live safely, on their own. And they're either, they do it in so many different ways. You could go to someone's home and help them out periodically, or they could live under your roof, or they live maybe in a facility, a community, or they could be a long distance caregiver like me. I go down to Charlotte, North Carolina from New Jersey practically every other month. Been doing that for the last 6 years, just so that I can be my mother's advocate, so I can make sure that I can check in on how things are going. I meet with so many people from her care team. And that's what unpaid caregivers have to do. On the average, I think it's like 24 hours a week. An unpaid family member does their job, does a caregiver job. Now imagine that and having a full-time job, or like you said, running a company, or even a part-time job, or an hourly worker. That's where things get really, really messy. That's where I kind of come in, because I like to share from my lived experiences, as well as all the experiences I have observed and had conversations with so many other family members. I like to share some of the lessons, and there's so many lessons on how to either prepare or how to deal with it, or how to deal with the end of that role as well, or after you no longer have that role. It's a complex role that most people don't think about until it happens.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's very near and dear to me. When I was, I want to say eighth grade, or no, maybe it was seventh or eighth grade, right? Somewhere around there. My my mom's parents passed away within about a month or so of each other. And my mom she is one of 11 or 12 siblings, and the youngest one had Down syndrome. So my aunt had Down syndrome. And so my mother ended up taking her. And so I'm an only child, right? And so my aunt really became like my big sister, or little sister in this case. She was able to walk around, and she couldn't talk necessarily, but she was able to function pretty normally for the most part. But she couldn't like live on her own. She needed someone to help her. And, she, she was stubborn, right? But she definitely needed someone there. And so my mom had to do that. And my mom and my dad were working full-time jobs on top of that. And so that was definitely something that really hit home when we were talking, because my mom was a professional, but she was also a caregiver, but she was not getting paid necessarily for, that as being her full-time job. And so that was definitely really rough. And, I know my mom and, my dad, they went through a lot through that. And then years later, they helped with my dad's aunt. And so, they had to help her with that as well. So they also just have a very kind, loving, spirit, which I think that's something that I think is what you have, and you have to have that for that caregiving spirit. And I think you probably interact with them. I mean, all the time. They may have to do it, I would say, maybe not begrudgingly, but it's not something that they pick and be like, yes, please let me do this, because like you said, they have other things that they're doing as well. And so how do you come alongside them, and how do you help those that are caregivers who also happen to be professionals?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for sharing your story. We all have one.
Yeah.
Rosalind Carter said it the best back in the 80s. She said there are four types of people in this world. There's one who's currently a caregiver. There's one who was a caregiver. There's one who's going to be a caregiver. And then there's one who's receiving care. That's it. There's
Yeah.
four types. You're going to be one or two. And you described your mother's role. It's interesting story you shared, because with 12 siblings, there's a lot of dynamics going on there. And then there's, having your own child to care for. It's complex. As I said before, caregiving has a lot of similarities. So when
Yeah.
I try to help a caregiver, the first thing I try to do is listen to the story, listen to their situation, and see where their biggest needs are. And sometimes that could take 5 minutes. Sometimes that could take an hour of them telling where they are in their caregiver journey. And then, m- my job is to show empathy, is to show compassion, is to show support, and to give them, again, just some suggestions to let them know that they're not alone, that they don't have to do this all alone, that there are resources out there. I probably talk, Roger, to one or two strangers a week from LinkedIn.
Mm.
They find me, they read my posts, and we just start having a conversation. And I will give 30 minutes to anybody, and we'll have a conversation, and I'll share some tips. I do that as a way of giving back, because my primary focus, of course, is to work with large employers so that we can, on a large scale, work with the HR systems, work with their benefits and their platforms so that we can try to really change the culture of care. But when you're doing it one-on-one, it really takes a lot of listening and not trying to solve their problems, but just give some suggestions. I'll give you a great example. Just over the weekend, one of my friends professionally on LinkedIn, who I've gotten to know pretty well, reached out to me out of the blue, texted me and said, listen, my wife had to quit her and be with her mom, who has had multiple surgeries, and she's been there 60 days, and she's about 4-hour flight away. And look, she can't keep doing this, and she's got siblings, but no one's chipping in. Do you have any suggestions? And before me just going blah, 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 you should do this, you do that, I'm like, wow. First of all, my heart goes out to your wife, goes out to you, because caregiving doesn't just impact that professional, unpaid family caregiver and the care recipient. It impacts families. It impacts jobs and communities. And so the first thing to show empathy was like, wow, my heart goes out. And then the second thing I said was, can we talk live? These aren't things you can try to solve by texting or emailing or pointing to an article or even to a podcast. It's more about having a conversation so you can really listen and get their situation. And this morning, I got on a phone with him and his wife.
Oh,
And
awesome.
I'm telling you, Roger, I did not interrupt her. She went on for 30 minutes and told me her situation. And I think most of it was venting.
Yeah.
I'm not a therapist. I'm not, I'm fortunate that I have experience and I can really speak to pretty much a broad spectrum of caregiving. But if you want to go down deep, like, legal documents, irrevocable trusts, or if you want to get into accommodations in a house so that someone can shower properly and safely, that's where I will refer the experts. But broadly, I could try to help somebody out, what to do starting today so that they can try to minimize the impact. And when I say impact, there's 4 types of impact that are proven, Roger, by research. I've lived it myself. I've seen it. And that's physical, mental, emotional, and financial. All 4 of those come into play and they creep up on you. And you could be the strongest willed individual. You could be in a very advantageous position of wealth. You could be fit and running marathons, but I can assure you, if you picture somebody averaging 27 hours a week being a caregiver, trying to open or run a business or trying to work 40, 50 hours for an employer, it's going to catch up to you because you can't sustain it.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. I love what you had said, that you're not there to necessarily just start off by giving them advice, but it's just listening. I think a lot of that, just in general in life can be not solved, but things could be different if we just stopped and listened. And I love how you said, well, I just listened to her for over 30 minutes, just talking. And like you said, some of it was venting and she needed to get that out because she needed to get that out because that's going to affect her in her 40-hour job plus 27 hours minimum, right, of doing caregiver or however 4-hour flights and all that sort of stuff. So I think that that's great. You had mentioned that it's, that there's going to be some toll, whether it's financial, physical, mental, there's always going to be something. And that speaks, again, thinking back to my own experience with my parents and my mom, there was things that we couldn't necessarily do, or, places we couldn't necessarily go, or, things my parents could afford or we could go and do, just because of that. And I'm not saying necessarily that my aunt was a burden. It was just we couldn't necessarily do stuff. And so, like, yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. I like how you're going in, and we had talked, and you had mentioned about how you're going in, and so you're trying to work with these companies, these large corporations, that you're not necessarily going in as a therapist, as you said, right? You're not going into just kind of, well, I'm just going to listen. But how can I go into an organization and start to think, okay, well, how can I help them not have that burden be felt as much? Because you've said something, not in this conversation, but in another, because it does take a toll on their work balance and their work that they're doing. So can you speak a little bit to that, about how you're going in and you're helping, and really why you're trying to go in and help these corporations kind of think through that, because they're probably not necessarily thinking about that as much.
So I'll go back to when I first was drafted as a caregiver. And I use the word draft because I didn't volunteer for this. I was basically voluntold by my siblings that I'm going to be kind of managing this. But I had the biggest job of my career. I was in HR. I was supporting the CFO of the company, and things were going really well. And within a month, I got a 3-minute phone call from my brother to tell me my father had a stroke. And I immediately went into what am I going to do mode. And I have to say, I didn't know where to turn. I mean, I'm in HR. I didn't know where to turn. Finally, somebody told me call EAP. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's what you use them for. And I called them, and all they did was give me a list of home care agencies. I didn't know what to ask. I didn't even know what they did. I basically hired the first one on the list to help my mother out. And they took 2 weeks non-refundable credit card charges that I personally put in there because I know my mother wasn't keen to this. And my mother fired them on the second day because they were being rude to her and told her, we're not going to listen to you. We're going to, we're not here to take care of you. We're here to take care of your husband. And they're Greek immigrants, so English isn't their first language. So you had all kinds of issues and challenges there. And I wish I would have been equipped with tools and have a better understanding of what I'm going to face by something as simple as my employer, or in the AP, having a triage of things to think through, or maybe even a web page to be able to look at and say, hey, these are the things I should be expecting and going through. So there is a lot involved in when it comes to the role of caregiving. And so when I approach an organization, I always say, look, there's a lot of evidence out there. There's volumes of evidence. On our podcast recently, we had Joseph Fuller from the business school, Harvard Business School, and he makes his living is doing constant research on the impact that employees are feeling and having as caregivers, and the impact it has on employers, and the loss of productivity, the turnover, the cost are significant, and they're highly, highly documented. And when we say what's costing the company so much, just some quick examples. This is an easy one, absenteeism, right? So if I have to leave and take my parent or my spouse to the doctor because maybe they have cancer, or maybe because they've fallen and broken a hip, or maybe because they have Parkinson's and they no longer can drive themselves, or I don't go to work till about 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock that day because I have appointments, or I've got to just take 3 days off like I used to do and go down to North Carolina and take care of things. That's absenteeism. That's easy to calculate and what it costs the bottom line of the company. But here's two other things to think about. The other one's called presenteeism. And that's like, picture you and me right now having a podcast. I'm trying to be intentional. I'm trying to be thoughtful. But yet maybe this morning I had a phone call from my mom's director of nursing at her nursing home who just told me a bunch of things that I am really concerned about, and I can't think straight. Yeah. Yet I've got 3 or 4 appointments that I've got to show up and think clearly through. And if I don't, I could cancel them. Yes, that's absenteeism. Or I could try to plow through them and not be as productive. And that's presenteeism. And that's going to impact the bottom line. And the third thing which a lot of people don't think about, is the cost to healthcare benefits. So if most organizations today are paying for healthcare benefits, they're subsidizing for some of those premiums, correct? And helping employees stay healthy. If you're impacted emotionally with stress or burnout and you're getting sick more, you're going to call out. And that also impacts the bottom line. So these are all the things that I could show you with volumes and volumes of research, Roger. But you know what really is going to show an employer why they need to act, why they need to do something, is when they see their own employees, their high potentials, their top talent, the folks that they know are producing day in, day out, when they have come forward with their caregiver crisis. Problem is that most caregivers are invisible. They don't share their stories at work. They don't talk about it because, well, for many reasons. Either they're not comfortable, either the culture isn't sensitive to it, either they fear negative repercussions. We interviewed a working caregiver. We have a series called Stories from Working Caregivers. And we interviewed a working caregiver just recently who said, you know what? I probably shared too much. All of a sudden, I wasn't being invited to conferences because they're like, well, they can't travel because they're a caregiver now. And so there's a fine line as to what to share, what not to share. But if you're not going to share, you're not going to get the support. So I and my partner, what we try to do very first thing is survey your workforce. Let's find out what percentage of employees are caregivers. The statistics are showing that 20% of your workforce, 1 out of every 5 employees, are caregivers. Those are the ones that are actually showing up and saying. So first, let's find out how many. And second, let's see what the gap is between you thinking that you're supportive and you have a culture of care and what your employees actually think. And research has shown there tends to be a big gap. But forget about what research is showing. Let's find out what's going on in your organization. And then once we have the results, we walk through them and we design 5 or 6 easy, not very expensive strategic goals to help start creating that culture of care. When I say easy goals, one is really easy, Roger. You get this. If you have a headquarter, like I'm in New Jersey, we have a lot of companies in New Jersey that are headquartered in New Jersey that have employees in their surrounding areas, as well as national employees or global employees. But we have companies here that have 10,000, 20,000 employees that live in New Jersey in the surrounding area. Well, you know how easy it is to create an web page that says, hey, are you a caregiver? Here are all the local resources that you can access or start thinking about. You know how easy it is to do that? How come we don't do it? Well, it's not easy for somebody who doesn't do it all the time and doesn't work on it or isn't thinking about it. And something that simple, you know what a big win that is? If I had a web page that I could have went to and said, hey, here's what you start thinking about when it comes to skilled nursing care is if you have to go there. Or here's what to think about to make changes to your mother's house so she doesn't fall. My father fell multiple times after his stroke. He survived 6 years with his stroke and fell many times. And what did him in was that last fatal fall. How great it would have been to not only learn about accommodations I should have done in the house, but to know that my employer's thinking about that and they want me to do that. I know I'm on a soapbox, Roger, so I apologize. I'm very passionate about these things, but this isn't all just about giving time off or paid time off or working from home. It's showing that you really do care, that you really want to retain that employee and that you're willing to do some things to support them so they don't have to choose between their job and caring for somebody. Because let me ask you, Roger, not to put you on the spot, but if you had to choose between going to a very important business meeting tomorrow or going to a very important doctor appointment with your parent, which one are you going to pick?
Yeah, I want to go with my parents. Like I want to go with my parents, but I also need money to be able to support my parents. So I want to go to the conference. Yeah, no, I wouldn't know. I want to do one thing, but I know I have to do the other thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know where the difference is going to play here? The difference is going to be if you work for a company that's not there yet, not getting it, not I'm not going to say not caring, because that's not true. We know companies care about their people, but let's just say they don't get it, right? And you're having to pick between going to an appointment tomorrow, a very important one with your parent, or a very important meeting, that conference that you need to be part of, okay, and that they're requiring you to be there physically. You're probably like, I need the money. How's this going to look? But no way, I'm going with my parent. You're going to start looking at other companies that value your skill set, that value your values, your family values, and they're going to be the company that says, you know what, you can be at that conference as well. Is there an opportunity where you can maybe call in when you're not in that appointment, and you can, dial in, live stream? You can do it from wherever you are. We're here. Let's figure it out, because we want your contributions, but we want you to be there with your parent as well. What are you going to do? You're going to probably start thinking about another company to go work for that does that.
Yeah.
And people are doing it, Roger. People are leaving jobs, and everyone thinks that these are people that, yeah, it's okay, we'll go replace them. No, these are senior leaders, especially women, that are leaving with a snap of a finger, because they are not getting the support, and they don't feel like their companies are being flexible enough, and they will dedicate their time to their family, and then they'll go find a company that will value their skill sets.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that. You had mentioned earlier, well, how many people have you had conversations with, like, oh, I'm a caregiver. Thinking back from when I was, in a couple of companies, it was almost like you had said, like, oh, I don't want to share too much, or I don't want to say too much or anything, right? It was like an afterthought. It was like, oh yeah, well, I do this, well, I can't, because I take care of my mom, and then da da da. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like I just want to say it really quick to kind of let it fly under the radar, just so that you know that I'm doing that, but I'm not going to really let you know what the impact of me is doing that. But I'm just going to kind of throw it in there, and then I'm going to continue on with my conversation, because I don't want to put too much emphasis or focus on that, because I don't know how you're going to react. I don't know, what you're going to think of me, anything like that,
Yeah.
And so that's, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think back to those conversations, and every once in a while there was one, they're like, oh, well, I'm really taking care of my parents, or I had to quit my job because, so now to, I remember there was one or two employees that I remember had to quit their job just to, you know, help their families and all that. But yeah, it does seem to be kind of, it's more of it's like an not an afterthought, but it's just like, let me just say this really quick and then continue on.
Yeah. And look, again, I'm not blaming managers. Just like I don't blame somebody who, when you tell them you have cancer, or you have an aunt at home who is challenged, and she's like a sister to you, and somebody who has no idea what you're talking about has no way of responding to that,
Yeah.
whether it's a manager or a peer. And chances are they're going to like, oh, okay, and then move on. And you're going to like, wow, that was insensitive, or you're like, oh, well, I shouldn't have brought it up,
Yeah.
or somebody says I have cancer. Sometimes we don't know what to say. And sometimes we choose not to say anything, or we just don't know what to say. So Sal and I have been asked to go and do webinars at companies, and we hesitate because we want companies to succeed. And if we do a good enough webinar where employees are really inspired and educated to start having conversations at work with their manager, if we haven't prepared their managers, we've set them up to fail. And so when somebody says, well, Zack, how do you prepare a manager if they haven't been a caregiver? Well, it's easy. It's like anything. It's just giving them tools to be empathetic. And I'll give you one really quick one, which is really an easy one. So anyone who's listening to this who manages people, we all get into this routine where we're like, how's it going? Maybe Monday morning check-ins, or Friday, afternoon checkouts, during the week with your direct report. Yeah, how's it going? Maybe instead of asking that, because typically if somebody asks me that, they're probably thinking they want to know something work-related,
Yeah.
right? Oh, yeah. Well, this deadline, we're on task, or, I, had this issue with this coworker. I don't know. Most of the time you're going to think it's work-related. Maybe ask it in a different way. Ask it in a way where you're really going to let them open up if they're comfortable. To your point, Roger, you might not want to be comfortable to share anything, right? But you leave that up to the employee. But if you're not asking or giving the opportunities to do that, then how will you ever learn? So here's a question. Instead of saying, how's it going this week? Instead ask, hey, do you mind sharing with me what is something that you anticipate is going to be really difficult you're going to have to deal with this week? Or if you want to talk in the past tense, Monday morning, hey, instead of saying, how was your weekend? Hey, I had a kind of a challenging weekend. I'm just curious, did you deal with anything difficult this past weekend? Anything you want to share? And then shut up and let them talk. And remember what I said earlier, don't solve it. Listen, acknowledge, say things like, that sucks. It's okay. And once your employee starts realizing that, wow, there's a human person behind this human manager, they may start feeling more comfortable to open up and share. And that's how we're going to have, this more storytelling. I love your title of your podcast. And the only way we can reimagine some of this, conversations to occur is to give the opportunities. And you're doing a great job of that with your podcasting, Roger. Let's do that in the workplace too. Let's not just all make it about work. Let's try to make the opportunities occur where we can talk about some important stuff that happens in our lives, because life is happening. I mean, caregiving is part of our life. We don't leave it at home. We don't check it out. We bring it to work with us.
Yeah. I liked how you had said, ask them, frame the question in a different way so that they can, if they feel comfortable, to go a little deeper and even share personally. But I like what you said, and then just shut up. Just let them talk. It's funny because I was thinking, man, just not in real life, right? But just in everyday life, right? Like, what if I did that with my kids, right? He's 10 and 5. I mean, I don't know what the 5-year-old would say, but the 10-year-old, right? Starting to go through things and think through things, right? But even my wife, or just people that you come into contact with, ask them a way that they can go a little bit deeper if they feel comfortable, and then shut up, let them actually talk, and then respond, so respond, not react or solve, right? You just like, man, that sucks. Or like, wow, that's great. I think that's such a huge tool that not only can people think about that in this particular instance, but as they start practicing that more, I think that becomes more familial and more familiar, so that they can do those sort of things, in the workplace. So I really love that. That's great. Zach, if someone, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to share real quick, if it's okay,
of course,
a real life example.
Yeah.
Where when a leader shows those type of empathetic skills, or even shares their caregiving story, it is huge. I want to just give you a quick example. Selma and I did 2 webinars recently. One was just kind of cut and dry. It was just Selma and I talking and doing the caregiver, education and awareness. And it was okay. It was okay. We had a few questions in the chat room. But in the second one we did with a different company, we had the COO at the time. He's the CEO now. He's a brilliant, fantastic leader. And he got on and did a fireside chat with us. And he facilitated the questions. And we asked him before we did this, those empathetic questions. Hey, what's something difficult you've dealt with being a COO of a company, that you don't normally talk about at work? And he shared his parents and what he does. And we asked him permission. Do you mind sharing that on the webinar? He said, sure, I'd be glad to. If he didn't, then we would never have brought it up. So he brings it up. Roger, our chat room blew up. We couldn't keep up with it. There were over 100 people in this chat room, and we were trying to keep up with all the comments and all the questions. That's engagement. That's sharing, being a good leader, and that's getting those stories out, role modeling, and being courageous with it. So thank you for
of course, that's really cool. It shows a lot when the leadership is willing to share with that, because it's, we feel, oh, they're up here, they don't understand. They're just worried about the bottom line and this, but then it's like, oh, right. What do they say? Like, don't meet your heroes. Cause it's like, cause they're humans too. Right. And it's the same thing, it's like, oh yeah, no, they're here. Those managers, those directors, all that, like they go through the same thing as well. So yeah, no, that's great. Zach, if someone was thinking, okay, well, you know what, man, I'm a caregiver. I'm a professional as well. And they're thinking like, well, I want maybe to know how to get some resources, but I also want to think about maybe, maybe I'm a director, maybe I'm not a director, but I know somebody and I can get the ear of somebody. And they're thinking, how can I bring this into our organization? What are some things that they need to think through for that?
Okay, so kind of a two-part question.
Yeah.
Let me the first thing I'd like to address is anyone, where to go to for resources, whether you are an HR leader, an employer, a manager, or working caregiver, or an employee who is concerned that down the road you may be doing this, right? So the first thing is, let me give you the bad news. There's too much out there. There's literally too much out there that if you start Googling at midnight, which is where most people do,
Mm.
and sorry, I use Google, whatever browser you're using, my son works for Google, so I got to do that. But if you'll find once you start doing that, you're going to be overwhelmed. And so that's the tough thing. I'm going to give you a heads up. But the good news is that if you start fine tuning and be specific with exactly what you're looking for and focus on professional websites, you'll find that most of them have a caregiver page. Anything from AARP has excellent caregiver dedicated resources, and they're not selling you anything.
Yeah.
American Heart Association, all the large associations for cancer, Parkinson's. Recently, we interviewed, everybody knows Seth Rogen, right? Seth Rogen, the comedian, and his wife, Lauren Miller, have started a charity called Hilarity for Charity.
Oh.
And it's designed to support caregivers who have a care recipient or a family member who has Alzheimer's or dementia, because his wife, Lauren, went through it herself. And she doesn't want anybody else to deal with this. We had them on our podcast, not Seth and Lauren. We had the director of the charity on our website and walked us through their caregiver sources. Probably the best I've ever seen. Who would have thought? They have a caregiver roadmap, which you go on, and it'll start helping you think through comprehensively everything from A to Z. So these are these are the sources that I would ask people to go to, and to be careful with some of the other sources that are selling you things.
Yeah.
They're selling you home care service, selling you, things to house renovations and things like that. Now, to your other part of the question, if I'm an employer, those same resources for caregiver, there's also resources for employers. And more sites are becoming savvy to that. And there's some really good caregiver sites that are doing specific resources for employers. So ARP has a specific resources for employers to look at and say, you're an employer, here are the things you should be thinking about. You want to start an ERG, you want to do caregiver support groups. It's giving you some really good guideline. So read up on that, okay? Shameful plug, I have a book, okay? It's called Working Caregiver, The Invisible Employee, which, Roger, as a treat, as a thank you to you, if anybody reaches out to you, and I will get this book to them. If they're comfortable, give you their address, I will mail the book. That's how much
Awesome.
I am very, very passionate about. This is a very easy, quick read. If I'm an employer, what should I do if my employee needs me? I'm happy to donate that for free, but just with your help. If somebody
Awesome.
will
Yeah.
do that through your podcast. But employers and HR folks really don't have an excuse. There are so many professional, great resources. Oh my goodness, Family Care Alliance of Caregiving, the National Alliance of Caregiving, a lot of these professional caregiving sites that are not selling you anything. They actually look for donations. They're non-for-profit, have specific employer websites,
Wow.
pages dedicated to employers. So those are recommendations. And if you really want to have a conversation, I'm always talking to anybody. I told you, Roger, I'll give 30 minutes to anyone as my way of giving back. Even if you're an HR leader and you don't know anything about caregiving, I'll walk you through it. The best way is to just connect through me through LinkedIn, give me a direct message, and we'll figure it out and we'll have a conversation. I'd rather help you try to figure this out and go do it on your own than not.
Awesome. That's fantastic, Zach. So we will definitely put that in the description as well if they're looking for the book, if they're looking to have a call with you or anything. So where do you want them to connect with you? Where can they find you online? What do you want them to do when they get to your website? How do you want them to connect with you?
Right. So the best way, which I mentioned a lot of your viewers use LinkedIn, the best way is LinkedIn. I am Zack Demopoulos, all one word, on LinkedIn, probably the only one on LinkedIn. So I should be easy to find. But also, if you'd like, and Roger, if you can, provide those links, but you can send me an email anytime at info@ieadvocates.com. And IE Advocates is short for Invisible Employee Advocates, but info@ieadvocates.com. You can go to our website, invisibleemployeeadvocates.com. And on there, there's a contact us, and they'll come to us. Also, we have a lot of resources on our website that you can just browse through at your spare time. There's podcasts that you could either watch or listen to. There's that series I mentioned before, Stories from Real Working Caregivers. A lot of resources to either educate you, raise your awareness, or more importantly, to help you feel that you're not alone in this. You're not alone, I can assure you.
Yes, that's fantastic. We will definitely have that in the description so that people will have that. Zack, I really appreciate you coming out. I really appreciate your offer. I really appreciate the fact that you care so deeply about this and you're not looking to just sell people on something. You're just looking to listen, to help out because you've been there, you get it, and you want to help people through that. So thank you so much for your heart for that. We will have those links in the description. Zack, it has been absolutely fantastic having you here and continuing to get to know you. So thank you so much for being on today. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Pleasure, Roger, is all mine. I really love, and I mean what I said, I love your podcast. My goal is that we can do more stories in the workplace. Let's get comfortable. Let's create workplaces where we could have more stories like this so people could feel more comfortable to share, just like I did with you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Zack.